To speak of the Imperium of man is to articulate an absurdity. It is to give name to 1,000,000 worlds and to pretend this name implies unity. It is a lie. The Imperium is not an empire. It is a scattershot of 1,000,000 isolated points of light, 1,000,000 fragile terrariums of human life, separated by gulfs of cold, dead vacuum so vast that the human mind collapses when contemplating them. Light itself, the fastest thing in the material universe, takes millennia to cross these voids. It is an empire defined not by its territory, but by the sheer crushing impossibility of the spaces between its territories. This is its fundamental fatal flaw. The galaxy does not care for mankind. The very medium of interstellar travel, the Imperium, is a roiling psychic ocean of unadulterated madness, an abstract hell populated by entities of pure malice for whom mortals are but transient whispers of emotion. The miracle of the Imperium is not its size. The miracle is that on any given day it exists at all. It does so only by a trinity of impossible fragile connections. 3 pillars holding up a roof of collapsing stars. To lose one is a catastrophe. To lose all 3 is the end. The first pillar is the light, the very soul of navigation. The Astronomicon. From the golden throne of holy Terra, the psychic might of the God Emperor of mankind burns across the galaxy. It is not a simple beacon. It is not a signal. It is a psychic bonfire of incomprehensible magnitude, a single steadfast point of illumination in the howling, formless chaos of the warp. It is the North Star for 1,000,000,000 lost souls. It is this light, and this light alone, that the mutated navigators with their third eye perceive. It is their anchor in the unreal. Holding to it, they can steer macro-haulers and strike cruisers through the impossible tides, translating nightmares into vectors, sensing the psychic currents that would otherwise dash their vessels against shores of insanity. They sail on an ocean of emotion, and the Astronomicon is the only proof that a shore exists. Without it, blindness. Utter and absolute. To be a navigator and to lose sight of the Astronomicon is to be a deep-sea diver whose airline has been cut, plunging into an infinite crushing abyss with the pressure of 1,000,000,000 screaming souls pressing in from all sides. The ship is not merely lost. It is consumed. The Geller field protecting the ship fails, and reality dissolves. The Astronomicon is the artery. Its loss means no ships can make the long jump. No fleets can reinforce. No governors can flee. No aid will ever come. It means the physical isolation of every world instantly and absolutely. The second pillar is the nervous system of the 1,000,000 worlds. Astrotelepathy. While the Astronomicon guides the body, the astro-telepathic network guides the mind. This is the only form of faster-than-light communication. It is not a science, but a terrible, painful miracle. It is a network of living souls, the astropaths. These are individual psychers taken by the black ships, their minds scoured and their bodies broken, their optic nerves burned out by a sliver of the Emperor's own power in the painful soul binding. They are living conduits, transmitters of thought. Grouped in vast cathedral-like choirs, they scream their thoughts into the void. A High Lord's decree from Terra, a sector-wide call to arms, a whispered warning of a Xenos fleet. All must be translated into psychic metaphor, a torrent of agony and imagery, and flung into the Imperium. It travels across the stars, a dream of anguish, to be received by another choir, whose members collapse in seizures, bleeding from their empty sockets as they transcribe the psychic shriek. It is a system built on pain delay and terror. A message can take months, years, even arriving corrupted, a prophecy of doom rather than a tactical update. But it arrives. It is this network that holds the Administratum together. It is this network that allows the Imperium to act as one entity, however slowly, however ponderously. To silence it is to sever the spinal cord. It is for the hand to no longer know what the brain commands. It is an isolation not just of body but of purpose. It is the beginning of ignorance, and ignorance is the womb of heresy. The third pillar is the blood itself, the tithe. The Imperium is a colossal, endlessly hungry beast. It functions on the constant, non-negotiable flow of resources and souls. This is the Imperial tithe, the price of existence. Every world pays. From one world, the black ships take its psychers, a psychic tithe. From another, the Adeptus Mechanicus claims its entire output of promethium ore and rare earths. From another, the Astra Militarum demands a founding of new regiments, ripping tens of millions of soldiers from their homes to fight and die on worlds they have never heard of for a cause they barely comprehend. And from some, it demands food. This is a circulatory system of steel and faith. Gigantic city-sized freighters, vessels millennia old and crewed by generations of void-born ply the established warp routes. Their holds are overflowing with the lifeblood of planets. They are the corpuscles carrying sustenance to the heart, to the forge worlds, that build the weapons to the hive worlds, whose teeming billions must be fed to the shrine worlds that anchor the faith. The tithe is the rhythm of the Imperium. Its arrival is as certain as the tides. Its cessation is unthinkable. To halt the tithe is to induce a starvation cascade. The armies in the field run out of munitions. The forges fall silent. The teeming billions of the hives begin to starve, and when a hive starves, it turns on itself. It is a logistical apocalypse. This brings us to Ethelberg, our subject, our protagonist if a doomed world can be called such. Ethelberg is a planet of no consequence. It does not appear in heroic legends. Its name is not whispered in fear. It is quite simply a field. An agri-world. A temperate, gentle planet of rolling golden plains, shallow seas, and predictable weather. Its function is singular. It grows grain. Billions upon billions of tons of it. Its continents are dominated by colossal harvesting combines, towering machines of a forgotten age, piloted by men who perform their duties with the ritualistic fervor of priests, yet who could not fix a single cog. Its people are placid, pious, and fundamentally ignorant. They live in modest, architecturally unimpressive cities clustered around the towering cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy. They are entirely dependent. They receive their high technology, their Vox systems, their medical supplies, the power cores for their harvesters from off-world, from the inscrutable tech priests of Mars, who maintain a small enclave. They rely on the Imperial Navy for protection from pirates and Xenos they have only ever seen in stained glass windows. They are the perfect Imperial world, productive, compliant, and blissfully unaware of the galaxy's horrors. They know only this: the sky ships come, the grain is given, and the Emperor protects. This is the foundation of our tragedy. Ethelberg is a single healthy cell in a colossal body. It performs its function without question. It trusts the body to provide. Now we pose the central, terrible question. What happens to this cell when the organism dies? What happens when, in a single unperceivable instant, all three pillars crumble? What happens to Ethelberg when the light of the Astronomicon is extinguished, plunging the warp into eternal, unnavigable night? What happens when the psychic choirs scream their last, and the astropaths reach out only to feel a cold, crushing, silent wall? What happens when the great tithe ships laden with the grain of 1,000 harvests simply stop coming? This is the story of Ethelberg. Not a story of invasion, but of abandonment. The story of a world suddenly and completely left alone in the dark. The air in the choir spire of Ethelberg was always cold, a refrigerated stillness meant to preserve the ancient, fragile machinery of the soul. At its apex, suspended in a sanctified harness of brass and iron, was Malachias, the master astropath. He was a husk of a man, his eyes long since shriveled to scarred hollows beneath his ritual blindfold. His mind was not in the spire. It was light years away, drifting in the chaotic ethereal ocean of the immaterium. He was the anchor for the Ethelberg choir. 200 lesser astropaths arranged in concentric rings below him, their own minds linked to his, amplifying his power. They were receiving a routine cargo manifest from the solar segmentum relay station, a whisper of tithe adjustments, the familiar drone of the administratum's endless voice. Malachius filtered the psychic static, his mind a sieve, sifting for the single clear signal. It came as expected, a flicker of coded imagery, an eagle a scroll, a measure of grain. And then, it did not simply stop. It shattered, the routine signal compressed into a single agonizing point of light. It detonated. The peaceful metaphorical data stream became a psychic tsunami, a deafening skull-splitting shriek of billions of souls of pure, unadulterated terror. It was not a sound. It was the concept of a scream injected directly into his soul. Malachius convulsed his frail body, slamming against the harness. Below, the entire choir seized as one. Men and women, old and young, slumped in their reception thrones. Blood vessels burst in their temples. Dark, viscous fluid wept from beneath their blindfolds. They clawed at their own faces, their own mute screams, lost in the overwhelming mental blast that filled the chamber. The psychic scream was a vision, a great golden light, the light he had known his entire life, the bedrock of his sanity. Snuffing out. It was a vision of billions of other minds, other astropaths on other worlds, all screaming this one final, inconceivable thought before being extinguished like candles in a gale. It was the sound of a god dying. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. The silence that fell was not mere quiet. It was an abyss, a void, a negative pressure that sucked all thought and hope from the room. The agony of the scream had been better than this. This was the silence of a tomb. This was the final, absolute absence of life. Malachius hung limply in his harness, gasping mucus and blood matting his beard. The spire filled with the sound of weeping, moaning, and the frantic, automated clicking of life support monitors switching to alarm status. Report, Malachius whispered, his throat raw. No one answered. He hauled himself upright, his mind, his soul still reeling. He did what he was trained to do. He reached out. He focused his consciousness, pushing past the skin of Ethelberg, past its quiet moons. He sought the familiar touch of the nearest relay station. Nothing. He sought the guiding light of the Astronomicon, the warm golden fire that had been his constant companion since his soul binding on Terra. Nothing. No warmth, no light, no distant comforting choir of humanity. Just a wall of cold, crushing, impenetrable static. It was as if the rest of the galaxy had just been carved out of reality, leaving only him and his dying choir floating in an endless empty ocean. He tried to scream into the void himself, a desperate plea for contact. His psychic voice hit the wall and dissipated, absorbed without an echo. He had never known this. He was trained for corruption, for demonic interference, for messages of madness. He was not trained for emptiness. The universe had turned its back. His attendants, robed and trembling, their faces pale, unstrapped him from the harness. They placed the thick, oiled leather transit blindfold over his scarred sockets, a procedure for leaving the spire. He was half-carried, his legs refusing to obey, down the long spiral stairs past the slumped and dying members of his choir. He was rushed through the streets in a black armored convoy, an honor usually reserved for inquisitors. The people of Ethelberg, the farmers and laborers, glanced at the speeding vehicles with dull curiosity before returning to their tasks. They did not know their world had just ended. Malachius was delivered stumbling and soiled into the basalt-walled Justica's court of Governor Varus. Varus was a large man, the scion of a line of large men, his authority as unquestioned as the grain harvest. He regarded the trembling astropath with profound irritation. Malachius. What is this? The chirurgeons report your entire choir in simultaneous apoplexy. Explain this. Failure. The governor stood before a massive star chart of the segmentum, a relic of a more optimistic age, its data points lit by glowing crystal. Malachias, supported by attendants, crumpled. His voice was a dry, rasping click shredded by the psychic blast. He could not find the bureaucratic language. He could not find the honorifics. He could only deliver the truth he had felt in the absolute cold. "Governor," he choked the words tearing at his throat. "The light. It is out." Varus scowled. "What light?" The spire's power grid. Malachias shook his head violently, tears of blood seeping from under the blindfold. He reached out a trembling hand, as if trying to find the governor in the darkness. "No, the Emperor's light. The Astronomicon is gone. The relays are silent. Terra is silent. All is silent." He paused, taking one last shuddering breath before delivering the epitaph. "So we are alone." The Justicar's court was silent, save for the whirring of the high-backed cogitator throne where Malachias had slumped. He had since been removed, taken by Varus's household guard to a secure location, a deep, comfortable cell where his madness, real or prophetic, could not spread. Governor Varus paced the basalt floor, his heavy boots echoing. The great crystal-lit star chart was now ominously dark. Its diagnostic runes flickered amber, reporting a total loss of signal from every astropathic relay and navigator station it monitored. Before him stood the only other two people on Aethelberg who mattered: Canoness Soria of the Adepta Sororitas, her polished silver power armor a stark, intimidating contrast to the room's gloom, and Colonel Junt, the aging, scarred commander of the Aethelberg Planetary Defense Force. He was compromised. Varus stated, his voice a low growl. He did not believe it, not entirely, but the words needed to be said. "The astropath is broken. A psychic overload. Warp madness. He will be tended to." I felt it. Governor Canoness Soria's voice was sharp, metallic, filtered through her helm's vox. My sisters felt it, a tremor in the faith, as if a billion prayers had suddenly been screamed and then ceased. This was not the raving of one broken mind. Colonel Junt, a practical man, cleared his throat. "Hysteria or apocalypse, my problem is the same. The high-orbit station is chaos. 5 bulk haulers are currently in geosynchronous orbit, refusing to dock, without Imperial Navy escort codes that we cannot provide. The merchant masters are petitioning for guidance. The astro-telepathic relays are, as the astropath claimed, dead. We cannot send or receive. For all practical purposes, Governor, we are alone." Varus stopped pacing. He slammed his fist onto the great oaken table that dominated the room. "No, we are not. We are delayed." He looked from Junt to Soria, his eyes narrowing. "The populace cannot know. They are children. They would trample each other to death in a single day. The truth, whatever it is a burden for us to carry. Not them." Junt nodded grimly. "Panic is an understatement, sir. Our entire society is built on the promise of the tithe, on the knowledge that there is an off-world. If they believe that is gone, it would be a complete societal collapse. The enforcers couldn't hold the cities for an hour. Then we will not tell them Varus said his decision, calcifying. He moved to his personal Vox console. We will impose order. Colonel Junt, you will declare a planet-wide state of emergency. Martial law. All PDF units are confined to barracks placed on full combat footing. Issue storm gear. All off-duty personnel are recalled. I want checkpoints at every major transit hub by nightfall." Sir Junt interrupted. "My men are loyal, but they are also part of the populace. They will ask questions. Then we give them an answer." Varus said. He activated the console. "And you will double the ration allotment for every man in the PDF and every Arbite's enforcer. Their larders will be full. Their loyalty must be absolute. As for the official reason, we are beset by a localized warp storm, a severe one. We will call it the Umbral Maw. It has temporarily severed our shipping lanes and scrambled all astropathic communication. It is a trial sent by the Emperor, one that demands fortitude and obedience." He looked at Soria. The ecclesiarchy will support this. Your priests will preach patience. They will preach faith in the Emperor's plan. Canoness Soria, who had been standing as still as a statue, took one step forward. The servos in her armor whined softly. I will preach faith, Governor. I will always preach faith. But I will not preach your lie. Varus's face hardened. Canoness, this is a matter of state security, a necessary fiction to prevent anarchy. Deception is the first step to heresy. Varus, she retorted. Her voice was cold steel. You seek to control the body politic. I must protect its soul. This silence is not a storm, it is a judgment. The Emperor is testing Ethelberg. He is scouring the unfaithful from his sight. My sisters and I will begin our own preparations. Preparations, Varus asked, a note of warning in his voice. The small sororitas contingent on Ethelberg was a ceremonial guard, but they were still battle sisters. An investigation, Soria said. A purification. If our world has been cut off from the Emperor's light, it is because a rot has set in here. A hidden cult, a failure of piety, a weakness of the spirit. I will find the source of this curse, and I will burn it out. You may manage your cities, Governor. I will manage their souls. She turned her red cloak, sweeping the floor, and exited the court without waiting for dismissal. Her armored footsteps echoed down the hall. Varus and Junt were left alone. Junt looked profoundly uneasy. I don't like this, sir. She's uncontrolled. Varus stared at the dark, lifeless star chart. It doesn't matter. Let her hunt her ghosts. It will keep the zealots busy. You have your orders, Colonel. Lock down this planet. No one gets in or out of the spaceport. Cut all civilian Vox traffic. Seize the data looms. We will hold the line. The ships will come. They must. The lie held for a time. On the surface of Ethelberg, the rhythms of life continued, governed by the whine of harvesting combines and the tolling of the thrice-daily bells of prayer. But in the cold void above, the first fatal symptom of the disease was plain to see. The tithe did not stop. It was the planet's entire purpose, a function as mindless and automatic as a heartbeat. From the vast prairie continents, automated bulk lifter shuttles, each the size of a city block, continued their ascent. They rose on pillars of chemical fire, their holds groaning with billions of tons of processed grain, harvested ground, and sanctified according to ancient edict. Their destination was Sol's Anvil, the high-orbit way station, a spinning pockmarked asteroid hollowed out to serve as the planet's primary grain silo and docking port. The shuttles arrived. They dutifully disgorged their cargo into the cavernous vacuum-sealed holds. And then they waited. They waited for the great Merchant Guild freighters, the Star Gorgers, to arrive. They waited for the colossal, void-blackened ships that would attach their kilometer-long umbilical docks and drink the tithe, transporting it to the hungry hive worlds of the segmentum. The freighters did not come. Within 3 weeks, Sol's Anvil was full. Its internal capacity, designed to hold a 6-month buffer, was overwhelmed. The grain dust hung in the station's corridors like a thick golden fog. Shuttle after shuttle arrived, finding no berth, no place to unload. They formed a silent, glittering traffic jam in the planet's upper atmosphere, a queue of lost purpose. The shuttle pilots, simple void-born workers, voxed the station, then the surface, their messages growing increasingly frantic. The only reply they received was the governor's automated planet-wide broadcast temporary delay due to the umbral maw. Maintain readiness. The Emperor protects. This logistical breakdown was not lost on the Adeptus Mechanicus. In their walled enclave, the Forge Minor Omnisia Prime, the tech priests saw the truth not as a psychic scream, but as a void in the data stream. Their own astropathic messengers shielded deep within their forge had also fallen silent. But more importantly, their supply ship, the Ark of Cogged Deliverance, scheduled to arrive from the forge world of Grefon 4, with vital replacement parts, purified oils, and cogitator wafers, was now 90 days overdue. To the logic-driven mind of a tech priest, this was not a delay. It was a failure of a critical system. Their response was immediate, logical, and utterly without mercy. They hoarded. Magos Dominus H7 Kovlar declared his enclave sealed under the protocol of the Unlit Forge. The great adamantium gates of their compound slammed shut. They refused all petitions from the governor's office. A delegation of agri-managers desperate for aid arrived at the gates pleading for the Magos to repair a dozen failing harvester combines. The machines were grinding to a halt in the fields, their ancient machine spirits groaning. Without the tech priest's blessing and arcane knowledge, they would not restart. The delegation was met by a Skitarii patrol, its red-robed warriors leveling radium carbines. A vox emitter on the wall crackled to life with a dry, synthetic voice. The Omnissiah's compact requires input to provide output. No replacement components have been received. No maintenance can be rendered. The assets of the Adeptus Mechanicus are now preserved against the coming entropy. Begone! The great machines, the very tools of Ethelberg's survival, were left to rust in the fields. The tech priests began reinforcing their walls, their true god, not the emperor, but the machine, and they would sacrifice the entire planet to keep its heart beating. On the surface, Governor Varus faced a new crisis. The tithe was backing up. The planet's own granaries were overflowing. The shuttles unable to dock in orbit had begun to return fully laden to the planetary spaceports. The people were starting to notice. The sight of the tithe returning was unprecedented, a deeply unsettling omen. Varus, acting with the desperate cunning of a cornered politician, saw an opportunity to spin the disaster. He issued a new proclamation. Behold his vox criers announced in the city plazas. Such is the bounty of Ethelberg, and such is the grace of the Emperor, that even while the warp storm rages, our cup runneth over. In this time of trial, your governor has petitioned the Holy Administratum, and they have granted a boon. A portion of the tithe shall be released to the faithful citizens. For the first time in the planet's history, the sacred, untouchable grain, the Emperor's food, was distributed in the streets. The people, their anxieties momentarily forgotten, erupted in celebration. It was a festival. They had never tasted such high-quality, refined foodstuffs. They sang hymns of praise to Varus and to the Emperor for their generosity. They feasted on the first symptom of their own starvation, gorging themselves on the surplus of a system that had already failed. In his high tower, Varus watched the celebrations with a cold, hollow feeling in his gut. He had bought himself time, but he had done so by committing a profound act of sacrilege. He was consuming the future. 5 years passed. The Umbral Moor warp storm, once a plausible excuse, had become a threadbare lie. In the grand concourse of the Ethelberg spaceport, the great arrivals and departures board, a magnificent edifice of brass and glowing crystal, was now a monument to obsolescence. Its surface once a flicker of constant updates. The gilded hand arriving from Sapra Mundi, the Emperor's burden departing for Hydrafa, was now static. The crystal was dark. The brass was tarnished. The names of ships long overdue had simply faded, their light emitters failing one by one. A thick grey layer of dust coated the winged skull of the Merchant Guild's crest. The spaceport itself was no longer a bustling hub, but a vast, echoing barracks for Colonel Junt's PDF. Soldiers sat listlessly on piles of cargo containers, their weapons oiled, their gazes fixed on the silent, empty landing pads. The festival of the returned tithe was a dim, bitter memory. The granaries had been emptied, and the harvest, now unsupported by Mechanicus technology, was shrinking with every season. The hunger had begun. The silence from the void, once a mere absence of information, had festered. It became a presence, a crushing psychological weight that pressed down on the planet's collective soul. The sermons of patience and faith preached by the ecclesiarchy began to ring hollow. In the damp lower levels of the hive cities, in the dark alleys between manufactories now silent for lack of parts, new voices began to whisper. They were the voices of shadow prophets, madmen, and demagogues who offered a different, more terrible truth. The Emperor is Dead cult was the first. Its adherents draped in black rags preached that the master of mankind had finally succumbed, and the Astronomican's failure was his dying gasp. They taught that humanity was now a race of orphans abandoned to the dark. Opposing them with equal fervor was the judged and found wanting sect. They taught that the Emperor was not dead, but that he had turned his face from Ethelberg. The Umbral Moor was not a storm, it was a divine quarantine sealing their world off as a leper colony of the damned abandoned to its sins. These whispers, at first dismissed as the ravings of the starved and desperate, began to coalesce into actual gatherings. In a disused cistern beneath the capital city of Varus Hive, a prophet, his eyes wild and his face skeletal from hunger, preached to a congregation of hundreds. "We have been lied to." He shrieked, his voice echoing off the corroded metal walls. "There is no storm, there is no delay, there is only the long night. We have been forsaken. The Imperial creed is the lie that kept us fat and placid for the slaughter. But we are the slaughter no more. We are the—" His sermon was cut short by the percussive thump of an Arbite suppression shield smashing open the cistern's rusted door. The assembled cultists turned their faces a mixture of fear and ecstatic fervor. A squad of enforcers, their black carapace armor reflecting the dim light, advanced in a solid wall, their shock mauls humming. Behind them, PDF troopers, their faces hidden by grim-visaged helmets, raised their laser guns. The order was given a clipped, impersonal bark from the Arbite's Justicar. "Purge the unclean." The cistern erupted. The crackle hiss of laser-gun fire, deafening in the enclosed space, mingled with the screams of the dying. It was not an arrest. It was a massacre. The troopers, hardened by 5 years of martial law, their own families hungry, their patience worn down to a nub, were brutal and efficient. The first shots of Ethelberg's long internal war had been fired not against an invader, but against its own desperate people. The lie that held the planet together was now being maintained not by hope, but by terror, and the seams were beginning to tear apart. 20 years. A full generation had been born and raised under the shadow of the Umbral Moor. The lie was no longer spoken. It was simply a suffocating, unspoken assumption. The children of Ethelberg did not look at the sky with hope, but with a dull, ancestral resentment. Governor Varus was dead. His son Varus II, a pale, paranoid man who had never seen an off-world ship, now ruled from the Justicar's court, a fortress he had not left in a decade. The true change, the one that broke the planet's spine, happened not in the cities, but in the golden fields. The great harvester combines, those ancient mile-long titans of agriculture, were dying. They were relics of a forgotten technological age, their machine spirits appeased by rites and blessed oils that only the Adeptus Mechanicus could provide. Now starved of parts, their sanctified lubricants exhausted, they ground to a halt one by one. Their colossal rusted hulks littered the plains like the skeletons of forgotten beasts. The irrigation systems powered by geothermal reactors the tech priests had sealed ran dry. The golden plains withered to brown, dusty tracts. The planet's purpose was to grow food. Now it could not. The Mechanicus enclave Omnisia Prime was a fortress of self-preservation. Magos H7 Kovlar, his biological components long since withered away, now existed as a vat-grown brain interfaced with the enclave's central cogitator. He viewed the starvation outside his walls as a simple, unavoidable data point. When the new Governor Varus II sent a desperate plea for aid, the Magos replied via a screeching Vox servitor impaled on the enclave's outer wall. Your biological crisis is not a variable in our calculus of survival. The Omnissiah provides for his faithful. You have failed your calculus. No assets will be diverted. The tech priests, their Skitari patrols now shooting scavengers on sight, were hoarding every last watt of power, every drop of oil for themselves. They were an island of failing technology in an ocean of starvation. Food production did not just decline, it plummeted. The 80% drop was catastrophic. The small-scale farming done with hand plows and muscle that the desperate populace reverted to could not feed a tenth of the hive cities. The vast, teeming billions of Ethelberg, a population sustained for millennia by industrial-scale agriculture, was now starving. Varus II, seeing his power base the PDF and the Arbites begin to waver as their own families starved, made a fatal declaration. From his fortress palace, he issued the Edict of State Preservation. All food, every scrap of grain, every mutated tuber dug from the polluted earth was declared state property. The PDF, now a ragged, brutal force motivated more by hunger than loyalty, was unleashed upon the countryside. They were no longer soldiers, they were reavers. They stormed the small, defiant farmsteads, seizing grain, executing those who resisted. They left the farmers, the very people who grew the food, to starve to death on their own barren land, guarding the empty silos with their lives. The response was inevitable. It came not as a protest, but as a human avalanche. The bread riots. It began in the lower levels of Varus Hive, in the vast unlit hab blocks, where the air was thick with the smell of desperation. A rumor that the governor's elite guard was feasting in the palace was all it took. The hive erupted. Millions, perhaps tens of millions of starving bodies surged as one, a single mindless entity driven by collective, agonizing hunger. They flooded the upper levels armed with pipes, shivs, and their own sheer numbers. They overwhelmed the first PDF checkpoints through weight alone. Varus II, watching the tide of humanity surge towards his palace on grainy picked screens, gave the order. Hold the plaza, whatever it takes. Colonel Junt's grandson, a grim, hollow-eyed man, obeyed. The PDF unleashed hell. Heavy stubber emplacements on the palace walls opened fire, their tracers cutting vast swathes through the crowd. Mortar teams lobbed shells into the dense, packed masses. The plaza became a slaughterhouse, a carpet of flesh. But the crowd did not stop. They could not. They were pushed from behind by the millions more who did not even know the battle had begun. They climbed over the bodies of their own dead, a tidal wave of emaciated limbs. The slaughter lasted for 3 days. When it was over, the plaza was silent, the silence of a charnel house. The revolt was broken. But Ethelberg was broken with it. In the dark, deep levels of the hive, far from the governor's control, a new, terrible economy was born. The strong survived. The weak became food. The first hesitant acts of cannibalism born of madness and necessity became the new unspoken rule of the underhive. 40 years of silence. The isolation had become a new law of physics. Governor Varus II, now a stooped, aged man, haunted by the picked ghosts of the bread riots, ruled a city-sized garrison that pretended to be a government. But the true power on Ethelberg, or what remained of it, resided behind the adamantium walls of Omnicia Prime. The Adeptus Mechanicus enclave was now a true fortress state. Within its sealed perimeter, the forges still glowed, but their light was feeble. Magos H7 Kovlar, his mind now fully integrated into the enclave's central cogitator, was facing his own private apocalypse. The sacred machines were failing. Entropy, the great enemy, was winning. Holy replacement parts had not arrived in 4 decades. His sanctified unguents were running dry. His power reactors were flickering, their spirits growing weak. He had hoarded, he had calculated, he had preserved. Now he understood. No help was coming. The compact with Terra was broken. The compact with Ethelberg's government was therefore null. He gathered his remaining tech priests in the great humming sanctum of the central forge. His metallic voice echoed from a dozen vox grills. The calculus is complete. The variables are known. The imperial authority of Ethelberg, embodied by the failed lineage of Varus, has defaulted on its sacred obligations. It has failed to provide raw materials. It has failed to provide security. It has failed to provide faith. It is a corrupted variable, a biological error. By the authority of the Omnissiah, whose voice is the true God of this galaxy, I declare the pact severed. The governor is an enemy of the machine god. All assets are to be redirected to internal preservation. Activate the red protocols. From deep crypts beneath the forge dormant for generations, the Skitarii legions awoke. They were not the pristine soldiers of a mighty forge world. They were patchwork horrors rebuilt with scavenged parts. Their limbs mismatched their optics, glowing with a desperate cold light. They were an army built from the bones of a dying world. Varus II in his crumbling palace heard the news not as a declaration, but as a final betrayal. The Enclave's geothermal generators provided the last stable power to his fortress. The Mechanicus-run water purifiers processed the last drinkable water for his PDF. This secession was a death sentence. Driven by the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose, he gathered his last loyal forces, 2 regiments of PDF. Their armor dented their lasguns powered by unreliable, jury-rigged power packs. They were thugs, but they were his thugs. The mech bastards have hoarded everything he snarled at his commanders, his voice a ragged bark. Power, water, weapons. They have left us to rot. We will take the forge. We will take it or we will die in the attempt. The assault was a pathetic tragedy. The PDF forces marched across the polluted wasteland, separating the hive city from Omnissia Prime, chanting ragged war cries. They expected a static defense. They were met with the cold, precise mathematics of slaughter. The moment they crossed the line of demarcation, the Enclave's automated defenses engaged. Tesla coils, silent until now, sprang to life, arcing blue-white energy that cooked men inside their flak armor. Hidden turrets rose from the earth, their heavy phosphor blasters turning squadrons to ash. The PDF's return fire weakened las bolts, and solid slugs pinged harmlessly off the forge's 20-meter-high adamantium gates. Then the gates opened. The Skitarii marched out. They advanced in perfect, terrifying synchronicity, their radium carbines spitting poison light, their transonic blades whining. They did not shout. They did not feel. They simply erased the PDF. The governor's army, the last vestige of planetary authority, broke in minutes. The survivors were hunted down and dragged screaming back into the Enclave. Magos Kovlar observed the victory from his data throne. It brought him no satisfaction. It had merely confirmed his calculations. The biological elements of the planet were a failed experiment. They would now serve a new purpose. The captured PDF soldiers, broken and terrified, would not be ransomed. They would be used. Desperate to maintain his machines, Kovlar had unsealed the Index Hereticus Mechanicus, a data vault of forbidden lore. His tech priests, their red robes stained and torn, began the dark work. They needed power. The reactors demanded fuel. The Skitarii needed repairs. They began experimenting with forbidden biomechanics, fusing living flesh with warped machine spirits in ways that defied the creed of Mars. They studied texts on warp energy siphoning, attempting to tap the lingering psychic stain of the astropath's long-dead choir. They created monstrous new servitors, half-living, half-machine, their minds shattered, their bodies twisted into grotesque tools. The lights of Omnissia Prime stayed on a lonely, defiant glow in the darkness. But the power that fed them was no longer divine. It was profane. 50 years, half a century of silence. The remnants of the governor's authority, shattered by their suicidal assault on the Mechanicus, had dissolved into warring bands of uniformed thugs. The planet was leaderless, but it was not without power. In the grand cathedral of the Emperor's Ascension, Canoness Soria endured. She was ancient, a creature of iron will and fading flesh, kept alive by the advanced life support systems of her sacred power armor, which had become her permanent walking tomb. For 50 years she had watched the planet rot, and her diagnosis had never wavered. This was a judgment. The governor's lies had failed. The Mechanicus's logic had failed. The only path left was the one she had always known, faith absolute and uncorrupted. The planet was not sick, it was sinful. The priests who had preached patience were long dead. Their successors, men who spoke of rationing, of community, of making the best of it, were in her eyes heretics. They preached compromise with damnation. In the 50th year of isolation she acted. Flanked by her two last grizzled battle sisters, their silver armor scratched and dented from decades of skirmishes, she confronted the Episcopal Synod. They were a council of old, terrified men huddled in the cathedral's nave, lit only by candle stubs. "You have preached survival," Soria's voice now, a dry, sanctified rasp, boomed from her armor's vox grill. "You have taught our people to endure their curse. You have not taught them to purge it. The Emperor has walled us off so that we may burn out our own rot, and you have failed him." She declared the theocracy of the Emperor's scourge, placing the planet's ecclesiarchy under her direct martial command. The priests who protested were dragged out by a new terrifying force, the Frateris militia. These were the truly desperate, the fanatical, the starved, who saw in Soria the last unblinking icon of Imperial authority. They were a mob armed with salvaged autoguns, fire axes, and a purity of hate that burned brighter than any star. Soria's new reign began the time of cleansing. The enemy was twofold. First were the skeptics, those who spoke of the past, who questioned the new order, who hoarded scraps of food. They were the weak-willed, the seed of the governor's original sin of deception. But the second, more visible enemy was the mutant. 50 years of starvation, of drinking, polluted water from failing purifiers, of background radiation leaking from the dying reactors of the hive cities had left its mark on the populace. Children were born with weeping sores, with mismatched eyes, with twisted limbs. This, to Soria, was the physical manifestation of the planet's sin. This was the corruption she had been sent to fight. The great plazas before the cathedral were transformed. The statues of imperial saints were torn down and replaced with lines of execution stakes. The pyres were lit at dawn and dusk, a new, terrible clock for the city. Thousands were dragged before Soria's confessors. Any physical imperfection, any word of doubt was a death sentence. The screams of the unclean being purified by fire became the new constant hymn of Ethelberg. The air, already thick with the dust of decaying cities, now carried the greasy, acrid smoke of burning flesh. With the church and the city centre secured, Soria turned her burning gaze upon the last symbol of the old failed order, the Justica's court. The fortress palace, though its master was long dead and its forces scattered, was still held by the most powerful remnant of the PDF, now a force of pure warlords. They were the unforgiven, the agents of the original lie. Soria declared the internal holy war. Her Frateris militia, tens of thousands strong, surged from the cathedral district, their ragged banners held high. They were a wave of screaming, fanatic humanity, led by the two remaining battle sisters, whose bolters roared like the Emperor's own judgment. The PDF, well-armed but spiritually hollow, fought to defend their stolen supplies. It was a brutal, grinding war of attrition fought block by block. But the PDF soldiers feared death. Soria's militia welcomed it as martyrdom. One by one, the PDF strongholds fell, their defenders overwhelmed and purified by Flamer. The war ended when Soria's forces breached the throne room of Varus, finding only a degenerate, inbred descendant of the governor's line cowering in the dark. Soria, carried on a litter by her strongest zealots, looked down at the whimpering man. "Your line began this with a lie," her vox crackled. "It ends with the truth. The palace was set ablaze, a new pyre to light the long night. The planet was now fatally fractured, the cold, logical island of the Mechanicus, the burning, fanatical theocracy of Canoness Soria, and the outer darkness where something new and far worse was beginning to stir. 70 years. The silence was absolute. The children of the first silence now ruled the rusted, bleeding world of Ethelberg. Canoness Soria's theocracy based in the cathedral held the city's core, but its power was a burning circle in an encroaching ocean of darkness. Her purges had been relentless, her pyres unceasing. But fire and faith cannot cure starvation. They cannot purify radiation-tainted water. They cannot silence the gnawing existential terror of abandonment. In the deepest lightless pits of the underhive and in the sealed, rotting penthouses of the spires, the desperate, the damned, and the depraved had begun to pray. They did not pray to the Emperor. He was the silent, absent god who had forsaken them. They prayed to anything else. They screamed their agony into the void, offering their souls in exchange for an answer for any answer. And for the first time in 70 years, something answered back. The great silent wall in the warp, the psychic barrier that had blocked the Emperor's light and the astropath's calls, had never been a true barrier. It was a shadow. It had blocked the Imperium, but it had been something else. It was the penumbra of a greater, darker power, and it had been listening. It did not block the whispers of the ruinous powers. It amplified them. It acted as an echo chamber, trapping the planet's psychic misery and concentrating it until the whispers from the other side became clear, seductive, and irresistible. The first to find purchase was the whisper of resilience. In the plague-ridden sump levels of Varus Hive, where citizens died in heaps from a dozen new horrific sicknesses, a new prophet emerged. He was a man who no longer felt pain, whose belly was swollen and round, despite the famine, whose skin was a tapestry of weeping, joyful sores. He called himself the Plague Father's Joy. He preached a new sermon. The corpse emperor demanded you starve and die in purity. He gurgled, his voice thick with phlegm. The hag canoness in her steel box offers only fire. But the grandfather, he offers life. He offers an end to hunger, an end to pain. He asks only that you accept his gifts. Thus was born the cult of the bloated flesh. The starving, the sick, the dying flocked to him. He embraced them, and they were transformed. Their gnawing hunger vanished, replaced by a feeling of blissful fullness as their bodies swelled with corpse gas and joyful disease. Their open wounds no longer hurt, but wept with life. They became a new, horrific family, laughing and singing in the filth, seeing their putrescence not as a curse, but as a blessing. They were the happiest people on Ethelberg. They no longer feared the pyres. They welcomed the warmth of the flames, their diseased flesh sizzling with joyous pops. They were a tide of loving, walking pestilence, and they began to spread. At the opposite end of the social spectrum, another god found its voice. In the highest spires of the hive, the last descendants of the planetary nobility lived in sealed, perfumed apartments. Their air filtered their ancient food synthesizers, slowly failing. They were not starving, not yet. They were bored. They were the damned souls who had everything and for whom nothing mattered. Surrounded by priceless art they no longer saw, and data slates of literature they no longer read. Their lives were a grey, featureless hell of terminal ennui. They sought sensation. At first it was exotic hoarded wines, then strange narcotics, then artful ritualized cruelties inflicted on their servants. It was not enough. A new voice, a sibilant whisper that promised feeling in a world that had gone numb, answered their call. It was the Prince of Pleasure, and it offered them an escape from apathy through extremity. This was the Symphony of Pain. This new cult, led by a pale, androgynous aristocrat named Lilith, explored every facet of sensation. They created art from their own blood. They composed music from screams. They sought the perfect, exquisite agony, the most profound and shocking depravity, pushing their nervous systems to new, uncharted heights. They saw the decay of the world outside, not as a tragedy, but as a glorious, freeing canvas for their desires. They were the antithesis of the bloated flesh, where Nurgle's cultists sought to end feeling in a blissful numbness Slanesh's followers sought to transcend it in a torrent of overstimulation. Inevitably, the forces collided. Soria's Frateris militia, her eyes of the pyre, launched brutal crusades into both the sump and the spires. They were met with horrors they could not comprehend. The Nurgle cultists charged them, laughing, their bodies exploding in showers of filth, eager to share their gifts. The Slaneshi cultists met their flamers with ecstatic cries, welcoming the caress of the fire, their dying screams indistinguishable from moans of pleasure. The two cults also warred with each other, a grotesque battle of decay versus excess. This spiritual war reached its horrifying climax in the ruins of the old spaceport concourse. Lilith's cult had planned a grand masterpiece. In a ritual of mass sacrifice, they intended to offer up 1,000 captured victims to their new god. At the same moment, the bloated flesh cult, seeking to claim the concourse as a sacred garden, began a ritual of their great unbirthing. The two psychic rituals, one of exquisite agony and one of fecund decay, flared at the same instant. Their combined opposing energies tore a hole in the thin veil of reality. It was not a great warp rift. It was a pinprick, a wound, and from it something crawled. A creature of brass and screams, a thing of claws and impossible angles, part Nurgle, part Slanesh, all madness. The first demon had been birthed on Ethelberg. The planet was no longer just isolated. It was now infested. 80 years. The machinery of society, already shattered, had now been ground to dust. Varus Hive, once a beacon of modest imperial industry, was a colossal tomb. Its upper spires shattered by the internal wars, and decades of neglect were skeletons whistling in the toxic wind. Its lower levels were a flooded, lightless maze, choked with a thick, sweet-smelling fog that rolled from the plague pits of the bloated flesh cultists. There was no more power. The last geothermal reactors had long since gone critical, flooding entire sectors with lethal radiation or simply growing cold. The concept of electric light was a myth, a fireside story. The vast majority of Ethelberg's billions were dead. They had perished in the famines, the purges, the riots, the plague wars, and the final crushing wave of despair. The survivors were a new breed, hard, savage, and born into a world where the sky was just a lid on a prison. The planet was now a patchwork of brutal tribal territories. The concept of a planetary government was utterly gone. In the ruins of the Justica's court, a brutish warlord named Grak, a mountainous mutant with scales on his skin, ruled the Palace tribe. He was a descendant of the PDF, and he wore the cracked, corroded breastplate of a long-dead colonel, though he did not know what the rank pips meant. It was just his strong metal. His soldiers were bands of scavengers who fought with sharpened pipes, salvaged chain knives whose teeth barely moved, and the occasional precious laser gun. These weapons were relics, their power packs holding so little charge they were often used as clubs. When one was fired, its weak, sputtering beam was seen as a sign of divine favor, a spit of the sky god. Grak's tribe warred constantly with the flesh weavers, the Slaneshi cultists, who had devolved into nocturnal hunters, and the poxkin of Nurgle, who controlled the vital polluted water sources. Technology was not just lost, it was feared. Any complex object found in the ruins, a data slate, a medical cogitator, a voxcaster, was either destroyed as an evil icon or brought to the tribe's shaman to be broken. These shamans were the new priests, a grotesque fusion of long-forgotten imperial rites and new, desperate superstitions. In a ruined hab block, a shaman of the Palace tribe, his face painted with ash and blood, chanted to a congregation of ragged children. He told the great story, and the sky god Emperor. He rasped the name, a distorted echo. He sat on his gold seat, and he looked at Ethelbug. He saw the old ones, he gestured to the surrounding skyscrapers, the old ones being the long-dead, technologically advanced generation, and he saw their lie. The lie of the sky ships that never came. The children hissed at the mention of the lie. So he turned his face, he left us, left us to the dark, to the Rot Fathers and the Scream Sisters, and only Grak, only the strong metal, only the tribe, only we survive. The symbols of the Imperium had been twisted beyond recognition. The Imperial Aquila, the two-headed eagle, was still visible, carved into the granite of 1,000 fallen buildings. To these new tribes, it was not a symbol of unity. It was the corpse picker, a holy icon of survival. It represented two heads fighting over one body, the ultimate truth of their new existence. Terra, the holy name, was a curse word. It meant forgotten or betrayed. High Gothic, the language of Imperial command, was dead. They spoke a guttural broken pidgin of Low Gothic, mixed with new words for mutation, for scavenged parts, for the specific horrors of their cult neighbors. Ethelberg had not just fallen, it had been erased. It was a feral world born not of primitive innocence, but of civilized technological decay. 90 years! The world had bled and festered and rotted, and now it had achieved a grim, savage equilibrium. The tribes fought, the cults spread, the demons hunted, and the sky remained utterly, terrifyingly empty. It was the one constant truth. The sky was empty. Until the day it wasn't. It was not the hoped-for return of the Emperor's sky ships. There was no fire, no thunder, no angelic descent. There was just a shadow, a flicker in the polluted upper atmosphere, as if the air itself had torn open and folded in on itself. A sleek, razor-thin silhouette, all blades and cruel, impossible angles, slipped through this tear, followed by a dozen smaller identical craft. They were the color of a fresh bruise, dark and iridescent. They were silent. They were alien. A Drukhari raiding party drawn across the galaxy by the psychic stench of Ethelberg had arrived. To the cabal of the Flayed Heart, the galaxy was a vineyard of suffering, and Ethelberg had just produced a rare, exquisite vintage. The concentrated, decades-long agony of a billion-souled planet, the psychic resonance of its fall from imperial grace into total savagery, was an irresistible perfume to them. They were not here to conquer. They were here to taste. Their ship's sleek raiders and venoms descended not on the fortified zones, but on the hunting grounds of the savage tribes. Grak, the mutant warlord of the Palace tribe, was in the midst of a ritual hunt for Long Pig's rival tribesmen when the raiders struck. They came not with the roar of battle, but with the whisper of a blade. Lithe, impossibly fast warriors in ornate, spiked armor leaped from their silent skimmers. Their splinter rifles puffed, and Grak's strongest warriors crumpled their bodies, instantly paralyzed by agonizing neurotoxins, their eyes wide with terror. The savages fought back with the desperate animal fury of their kind. They swung their sharpened pipes and buzzed their failing chain knives, only to find their blows skittering off unseen energy fields. The Drukhari were artists, and this was their canvas. They laughed high-pitched mocking sounds that cut through the screams of the dying. They were not killing, not all of them. They were harvesting. Shock prods, neuronets, and barbed hooks subdued the strongest, healthiest specimens. They ignored the obviously diseased pox-kin of Nurgle, their noses wrinkled in genuine disgust at such crude, unartful suffering. But the tribal warriors, the desperate scavengers, and especially the Slaneshi cultists, whom they found amusingly primitive, were all prime stock. Thousands of screaming survivors were dragged into the air by invisible tethers, bundled like meat and loaded into the waiting ships. It was an hour of pure, undiluted terror inflicted by beings so far beyond the comprehension of the tribesmen that they could only be seen as devils, the true demons the shamans had always warned of. The harvest was almost complete. The Archon of the raid, perched on the prow of his raider, was savoring the symphony of terror when a new player entered the field. He had been drawn by the sudden concentrated spike of new pain. From the deepest plague pit in the center of the ruined hive, a great bloated mass of filth and joyful disease erupted, a great unclean one, the demon that had been festering at the heart of the bloated flesh cult. It rose its laughter, a wet, bubbling sound, and bellowed a challenge, angered that these thin, pale creatures were stealing its children and toys. The Drukhari Masters of Pain paused. This was not a panicked mortal. This was a true shard of the warp, a being of chaos undivided. A war with such an entity was not profitable. It was messy. It would cost resources and slaves and time. With a bored, dismissive gesture, the Archon gave the signal to withdraw. The Drukhari did not retreat in fear. They simply lost interest. Their holds were full. The novelty had worn off. Their ships ascended as silently as they had come. But in their haste and their arrogance they left something behind. The webway portal they had used to tear in reality did not seal properly. It was a wound that would not close. It remained a shimmering, unstable fissure in the sky, a small, dark rainbow of non-color. From it, raw warp energy, the stuff of the Imperium itself, began to leak, drizzling down onto the already poisoned world. The Xenos had taken their slaves, and as a parting gift, they had left a cancerous tap dripping pure chaos into the atmosphere of Ethelberg. 100 years, a full century of darkness. The cycle of generations had completed. No living soul on Ethelberg had ever seen an off-world ship. No one knew what Terra was other than a word in a shaman's curse. The planet had found its new, horrifying baseline. In the deepest, most secure sub-basement vault of the crumbling Justicar's court, far beneath the ruins where the mutant warlord Grak had once ruled, a different, older power resided. Here in the governor's panic room, a bloodline had endured, shielded from the radiation, the plague, and the wars. But it had not endured intact. Cut off from all others, the line of Varus had turned in on itself. Generation after generation of inbreeding, of fear of madness, had produced its final heir. He was known as the God-Gov. He was a grotesque creature, pale and hairless, his limbs atrophied, his eyes milky and sightless. He sat upon a rusted, failing life support throne that he believed was the true gold seat of the Emperor. He was worshipped by the Gorge tribe, a degenerate cult of cannibals who inhabited the deep vaults, seeing him as a divine prophet. They brought him offerings of long pork, and he in turn spoke to them in what he believed was the holy tongue. It was a slurred, almost unrecognizable bastardization of High Gothic, the courtly language of his ancestors. Mankind is magnificent, he would drool, his blind eyes rolling. The tithe demands, obsequious, bring the flesh. The Emperor hungers. His tribe of cannibals would shriek in ecstatic reverence, not understanding a single word, only the terrible ancient power in his voice. He was the last vestige of the Imperial government, a blind, insane, degenerate god-king ruling a kingdom of bones in a lightless basement. Miles away, another lineage had survived. The choir spire, where Malachias had heard the final scream, was a shattered, wind-swept ruin. But its deepest sub-levels, shielded by psychic baffling lead, had also protected its inhabitants. The astropaths had been isolated, but their psychic gift was hereditary. Without the rigid training of the Adepta Telepathica, without the soul-binding ritual to protect them, their bloodline had run wild. Interbreeding in their isolated crypt, their descendants were no longer disciplined telepaths. They were psychers, a tribe of feral, unstable, terrifyingly powerful individuals. Their minds were cracked open to the warp. They were the mind witches of the wastes, feared and revered. They saw the leaking webway portal not as a Xenos artifact, but as a weeping eye of the sky god. They could draw on its raw energy, unleashing bolts of pure immaterium, creating illusions to terrify rival tribes, or whispering madness into the minds of their enemies. They were the most powerful sorcerers on the planet, an uncontrolled genetic time bomb, the legacy of the Imperium's most vital tool. Ethelberg was gone. The name remained a whisper in the dust, but the Imperial agri-world had been utterly and completely erased. It was now a feral world of the worst possible kind. It was not a world waiting to be rediscovered. It was a festering wound in the galaxy. Its population was a savage tribal mass dominated by superstition, mutation, and ritual cannibalism. Its ruling powers were a coven of wild psychers, a fortress of heretical tech priests, a fanatical theocracy of fire, and two burgeoning chaos cults, all picking at the corpse of a dead society. The sky wept raw warp energy from a Xenos inflicted scar, and deep in the darkness, demons roamed the land. The planet had been isolated for 100 years. The first slow death by abandonment was complete. Now it just waited stewing in its own damnation for the galaxy to notice it again. 500 years, half a millennium. On Ethelberg, empires of savage mutants and cannibal priests had risen warred and fallen to dust. The name Varus was as forgotten as the name of the first man to build a fire. The planet was a closed ecosystem of damnation, stewing in its own filth, trapped in an endless cycle of brutal short lives. The inhabitants, their bodies twisted by mutation, their minds warped by feral psychers, and the constant whisper of chaos, did not know that their prison was not the planet. It was the sky. The umbral maw, the great shadow in the warp that Malachias had felt the phenomenon that had severed them, was a vast psychic hurricane, a vortex of spiritual poison that had made the surrounding stellar region unnavigable. For 5 centuries it had raged a knot of madness in the fabric of the Imperium. And then, as capriciously as it had formed, it dissipated. The great tides of the warp moved by the death of stars, and the birth of gods far away simply shifted. The storm did not break, it unraveled. The shadow receded, and the star routes to the forgotten Ethelberg system, marked in red on Imperial charts for 500 years, were clear once more. In the vast cold darkness of space, the Imperial Navy light cruiser Vigilant Scion plied its lonely patrol. It was a Dauntless-class vessel, an old reliable hunter tasked with sweeping the newly reclassified sector Perdita 44, a region of space just declared Flavus Caution after having been Purpureus forbidden for centuries. On its bridge, Captain Carson, a man whose family had served the Navy for a dozen generations, reviewed the patrol vectors. He had never heard the name Ethelberg. It was just a system designator on his chart. Auspex, he said, his voice bored. Report. A young, ambitious ensign at the Sensorium station stiffened. Sir, we are detecting faint structured signals from the 4th planet. Triangulating. Sir, it matches an archaic Adeptus Mechanicus distress protocol. Automated. Very low power repeating on a long cycle. The ensign paused, checking his readings. And confirmed. The planet is a Terra standard environment. High biomass. Atmosphere viable. A lost world. Carson sighed. This was not the glorious fleet action he had trained for. This was paperwork. Hail them, he ordered. Standard Imperial greeting. Vox and astropathic. The bridge was silent for 10 minutes. The Vox officer reported only static. The ship's astropath, a robed, scarred woman, reported the same thing Malachias had felt 500 years before, a cold, dead, crushing silence. But this time, it was not the wall of a storm, but the emptiness of the tomb below. Captain Carson pulled up the system's ancient file from the Administratum archives. Ethelberg, he read aloud, his lip curling in distaste. Agri-world. Tithe grade Sol primary. Population estimate 9.4 billion. He looked at the dead, silent globe on his tactical display. Last contact, M41.512. Status lost. He turned to his scribe. Log entry. Stardate 8/14 M42. Encountered lost system Ethelberg. Primary world confirmed Terra standard. Faint Mechanicus beacon active. No Vox response. No astropathic contact. No signs of compliant Imperial authority or orbital infrastructure. System status is classified silent. He paused, considering. Transmitting all findings to Segmentum Command. Recommend follow-up investigation force as per Protocol Redigo 7. This world has defaulted on 5 centuries of tithes. It requires auditing. The message, a simple bureaucratic report, was given to his astropath. She screamed it into the void, a routine dispatch. It would take 6 months to reach the Segmentum fortress. For Ethelberg, the 5-century reprieve was over. The silence had been broken, not by a friend, but by an accountant. And the Imperium always collects its debts. 1 year. That is how long it took for the wheels of the administratum to turn. 1 year after Captain Karsan's report, the sky of Ethelberg changed. For 500 years, the only light in the sky had been the sun, the moons, and the sickly shimmering scar of the Drakkari's webway portal. Now the sky tore open, not with the silent grace of the Xenos, but with the brutal, deafening thunder of Imperial arrival. A dozen points of reality ruptured, vomiting colossal void-black structures into orbit. They were not ships. They were flying cathedrals of war cities of adamantium and macro cannons, their prows adorned with gargoyles the size of buildings. This was not a rescue. This was an expeditionary force. At its head was the battle barge Adamant Resolve, the fortress monastery of the Adamant Lions, a space marine chapter known for its grim, unyielding adherence to siegecraft. Flanking it were 3 strike cruisers, a phalanx of Imperial Navy frigates, and dwarfing them all, a dozen troop carriers, their holds filled with 1 million soldiers of the Volpone 501st Line Regiment. The fleet was an iron fist, an overwhelming, disproportionate display of Imperial might. On the planet's surface, the savage tribes looked up and screamed. The mind-witch psychers clutched their heads, their minds reeling from the sheer psychic noise of thousands of disciplined, faithful minds arriving at once. The Gorg tribe cannibals in their deep vaults prostrated themselves, believing their emperor had finally come to feed them. The fleet achieved a perfect, menacing geosynchronous orbit over the planet's major landmasses. Then the Vox channels, silent for 5 centuries, crackled to life with a sound so loud it caused physical pain. It was a planet-wide broadcast, a voice of pure, amplified authority that slammed into every broken receiver and rusted Vox grill. People of Ethelberg, the voice boomed, devoid of all emotion. This is Chapter Master Vaban of the Adamant Lions, acting by authority of the Holy Ordos of the Inquisition and the Administratum of Terra. To the savages on the ground, the High Gothic was incomprehensible noise. This world is in a state of 501-year tithe default. You are in violation of the Imperial Compact. You are in a state of apostasy. The voice paused, the static hissing. You will present your legitimate planetary governor, your ecclesiarchal representative, and your tithe-grade ledgers for our inspection. You will prepare for immediate audit and military garrison. You have 1 solar hour to comply. Failure to respond will be interpreted as a confession of heresy and betrayal. The Emperor judges. The hour passed. The planet's only response was the terrified howling of its feral populace. In the Forge Minor Omnisia Prime, the fragmented, insane consciousness of Magos H7 Kovlar, now a chorus of screaming data ghosts, heard the broadcast. It recognized the archaic codes, it recognized the authority, and it rejected it. It saw the fleet not as saviors, but as agents of the corpse god, the failed biological construct that had abandoned them. This was not a rescue. It was an attempt by a failed system to reclaim its property. With its last reserves of hoarded profane power, the Forge's defenses activated. A single desperate message was voxed back to the fleet. Not words, but a shriek of corrupted binary, a litany of heretical code that insulted the Omnissiah and the Emperor. It was followed by a single defiant act. A repurposed mining lance powered by a demonic fused reactor fired a brilliant red beam from the fortress's peak. The beam, thin and weak, lanced into the void. It struck the void shield of the nearest Navy frigate, flashing harmlessly before the lance sputtered and died. It was a gnat spitting at a titan, on the bridge of the Adamant Resolve chapter. Master Vauban watched the dissipated energy on his tactical display. His face, scarred and severe, was a mask of stone. "The charge is confirmed," he stated flatly. "The planet is Perdita. They have confessed. Signal the fleet. Prepare cyclonic torpedoes. We will cleanse this stain from the stars." He turned to give the order, but a figure stepped from the shadows of the command pulpit. He was a thin man in the black, unadorned robes of the Inquisition, a stark white eye on his shoulder. Inquisitor Kroll. No chapter master Kroll's voice was a dry rasp, older than the ship itself. Vauban's eyes narrowed. "Inquisitor, the world is lost. It is infested with heresy and mutation. It answered our greeting with violence. The judgment is clear." Kroll gave a thin, bloodless smile. "Annihilation is a mercy. It is a waste. This planet is not a loss, it is a lesson. The Administratum does not want this world destroyed, it wants its tithes restored. A new agri-world must be seeded, but first the ground must be prepared. We will not erase this world." His smile widened. "We will make it an example. We will demonstrate by hand the precise, agonizing cost of weakness. No quick death for Ethelberg. A full-scale, ground-based purification. Every soul on this planet is a testament to failure. They will be scoured, and the galaxy will be reminded that there is no escape from the Emperor's debt." Vauban stared at the Inquisitor, and then a slow, grim understanding dawned. This was not a sentence of death. It was a sentence of extermination in its most personal, brutal, and painstaking form. He turned to his officers. "Exterminatus is rescinded. Prepare for planetary assault. All ground assets, all of them. No quarter, no survivors." The sky burned. It was not the fire of a single merciful bomb. It was the fire of 1,000,000 points of entry as drop pods, orbital lances, and bulk landers punched through the toxic atmosphere. The cleansing of Ethelberg had begun. The adamant lions, true to their word, were the spearhead. Their drop pods, painted the color of grim granite, slammed into the planet's most fortified positions with the force of meteors. One detachment struck the heart of the cathedral district, where the descendants of Canoness Soria, now a grotesque, inbred cult of fire worshippers, held sway. They had devolved into a shrieking tribe, their faith a twisted parody. They worshipped a goddess of the pyre, and saw the arriving space marines encased in armor and descending on pillars of fire as her divine angels. They ran from their chapels, their arms open, crying for salvation. The adamant lions answered their cries with bolter fire, mowing them down in seconds. They were heretics, their faith so warped it was an insult. Their sisters of the Ebon Flame fought back their archaic, poorly maintained flamers, spitting uselessly against ceramite armor. The Space Marines were pitiless, their storm bolters tearing the devolved sororitas apart, their combat knives ending the bloodline Soria had fought so desperately to protect. Simultaneously, the 1,000,000 soldiers of the Vulpan 500 immersed, the line breakers landed in perfect, disciplined ranks outside the Hive City ruins. Their mission was simple: kill everything. Supported by columns of Lehman Russ battle tanks that crushed the savage barricades of rusted metal, they advanced in a tide of khaki and lass fire. They were met by the savage tribes, the Palace tribe, the Gorge tribe, the dozens of others. These warriors, armed with pipes and clubs, their faces painted with blood, charged the Imperial line in a wave of animal fury. The 501st did not flinch. They opened fire. The disciplined ranked volleys of las fire were a sight unseen on Ethelberg for 500 years. It was industrial-scale slaughter. The savage waves were annihilated, their charges breaking 100 meters from the Imperial line. The tanks rolled forward, their heavy bolters clearing the ruins, their battle cannons collapsing the makeshift strongholds. The most brutal fighting was in the planet's dark places. The Space Marine librarians, their minds shielded fortresses of pure will, led Terminator squads into the depths of the Hive. They hunted the Mind Witches. The feral Psychers, the degenerate line of Malachius, fought back with the raw, untamed power of the warp. They hurled bolts of green fire, conjured illusions of demons, and screamed psychic attacks that could boil a normal man's brain in his skull. But they were untrained children facing masters of the craft. The librarians, their force staves crackling, tore the psychers' minds apart. They erected psychic shields that turned their own wild power back on them, immolating them in their own chaotic energy. One by one, the legacy of the astropathic choir was silenced for good. In the sepsis pits, the Volpone 501st's flamer squads, blessed by inquisitorial priests, descended to cleanse the cult of the bloated flesh. The Nurgle worshippers delighted surged to meet them, eager to share their gifts. They were met with a wall of sanctified promethium. The fire squads turned the pits into an inferno, their gurgling, joyous laughter turning to screams as the cleansing fire burned away their profane blessings. In the high spires, the adamant lions breached the lairs of the Slaaneshi cultists. The symphony of pain met their executioners with ecstatic cries, welcoming the perfect sensation of bolter rounds. The Marines gave it to them, their disgust palpable, their work cold and efficient. The final battle was for the Forge Minor Omnisia Prime. Chapter Master Vaban led the assault himself. They blew the adamantium gates off their hinges with melter charges. Inside, they were not met by disciplined Skitari, but by the heretical, demonic-fused machine horrors that Magos Kovla had built. Metal and flesh monstrosities, powered by bound demons, charged the Imperial forces. This finally was a true battle. The Space Marines fought with righteous fury, their power fists crushing demonic engines, their thunderhammers shattering blasphemous servitors. They fought their way to the central forge, where the data ghost of Magos H7 Kovlar screamed at them from 100 Vox grills. A librarian backed by Vauban plunged his force halberd into the central cogitator, shattering the crystal vat that held the original withered brain of the Magos. The screaming stopped. The forge fell silent. After 1 year of relentless grinding purification, the planet was clean. The Imperial auditors walking behind the advancing armies made their grim tally. The tribes were gone. The cults were ashes. The heretics were scrap. The mutants were purged. 99.9% of the planet's population had been systematically and deliberately exterminated by their saviors. Ethelberg, the world of savages and monsters, was finally, truly dead. The sky above Ethelberg was empty once more. The iron fist of the expeditionary force had withdrawn its terrible work complete, but the void did not remain empty for long. New ships came. These were not the sleek greyhounds of the Navy or the vengeful fortresses of the Astartes. They were slow, ugly, colossal vessels, their hulls stained and pitted from centuries of service. They were the Sanctus Populi class colonizer barges, vast ark ships, their holds crammed with a human tithe plucked from the overflowing toxic hives of a neighboring segmentum. They were the new seed. They disembarked onto a world of ash and bone. The air was clean, painfully clean to their polluted lungs, but it tasted of cinders. Before them, the vast continent-spanning plains had been scoured by fire, and the ruins of the ancient hive cities had been leveled by orbital bombardment reduced to flat, glassy plains of slag. They were met not by a governor, but by a stern-faced missionary of the Adeptus Ministorum, his black robes stark against the grey landscape. He pointed to the vast, empty fields. "You stand on holy ground," his voice, amplified by a vox hailer, boomed across the silent ranks of colonists. This world was a jewel of the Emperor's, but its people grew weak. Their faith faltered. He gestured to the plains of fused glass that had been a city. In their isolation, they turned to heresy, mutation, and the demon. They have been cleansed. The missionary pointed to the prefab habtainers being unloaded from the barges. "You have been brought here to sanctify this ground. You will build new cities on the bones of the old. You will till the fields that were watered with the blood of the unfaithful. You are the second chance this world does not deserve." The colonists, pale and grim-faced, were handed tools and seed sacks. They began to build their new simple structures rising on the graves of millions. Know this, the missionary concluded, his voice dropping to a warning that cut through the wind. The Emperor is watching. Hold fast to your faith. Do not repeat the mistake. The price of weakness is purification. Far away in a data vault so deep its rock-crete walls wept with condensed moisture, a low-level scribe of the Adeptus Administratum performed the final rite. He located the file for Ethelberg Subsector 44. With a precise stylus flick, he deleted the red blinking rune that read Perdita. He replaced it with the stable black text classification Recolonized, Founding Status Secundus. He navigated to the Tithe Ledger page. He made a new entry, his fingers clicking rhythmically. Projected tithe commencement 50 solar years. Grade Sol primary. Resource grain processed. The file was closed. The scribe moved to the next item in his queue, a rounding error in ammunition supplies for a war zone half a galaxy away. The tragedy, the suffering, the damnation, and the purification of Ethelberg were now officially and utterly irrelevant. The books were balanced. The great merciless loop had begun again. To understand the 41st Millennium, one must understand Ethelberg, not the planet, but the process. The story of Ethelberg is not a tragedy. It is a diagnostic. It is the case study of a disease, and that disease is the Imperium itself. To analyze its fall is to understand the two distinct deaths that await every world of man. The first death was a biological one. It was the death of the isolated cell. When the astropath scream faded, the planet was severed from the heart and brain. And a body part cut off from the whole does not simply die. It rots. It putrefies. It becomes something other, something cancerous. The isolation lasting 500 years was a perfect incubator for the inevitable. Without the external, rigid, and brutal reinforcement of Imperial faith, the human psyche collapses. Without the sacred technology of the Mechanica Society, reverts to barbarism. Without the looming threat of the Imperial tithe, purpose is lost. Ethelberg's descent was not an accident. It was a predictable, unavoidable decomposition. The rise of the cults, the savagery of the tribes, the madness of the psychers, this was not an invasion. This was the natural state of humanity in a galaxy that hates it, the state that the Imperium and only the Imperium holds at bay. Ethelberg, left to its own devices, did not find freedom. It found damnation. It became a perfect self-contained ecosystem of heresy, a miniature demon world, a testament to the fundamental spiritual weakness of man. This was its first slow, putrefying death. The second death was a chemical one. It was the death of purification. When the vigilant scion first registered the distress beacon, the planet's fate was sealed. The Imperium, upon rediscovering its lost property, did not see a wayward child to be rescued. It saw a diseased limb to be amputated. The arrival of the Adamant Lions was not a mission of salvation. It was an act of sanitation. The inhabitants of Ethelberg, the degenerate, mutant, chaos-worshipping savages, were no longer human. They were the symptoms of the rot, and the only cure for such a deep-running infection is fire. The Great Cleansing was not a war. It was an extermination, a systematic industrial scouring of a failed experiment. The Imperium did not come to save the people of Ethelberg. It came to save the planet from them. This was its second fast and fiery death delivered by the very hands it once prayed to. Herein lies the central inescapable paradox of the Imperium. There is no good choice. The story of Ethelberg presents the two-pronged trap from which no world can escape. To be forgotten by the Imperium is to be abandoned to the void. It is to be left in the dark, where the only things that answer your prayers are the ruinous powers. It is to fall inevitably to heresy, mutation, and savagery. It is the slow death of the soul. But to be found by the Imperium after having suffered that fall is to be judged. It is to be held accountable for the weakness you displayed in your isolation. It is to be found wanting to be declared perdita and to be subjected to a purification so total that it obliterates every trace of your existence to make way for a new, clean population. The choice is simple: be abandoned and rot, or be rediscovered and be purged for having rotted. In this galaxy, salvation and damnation are the same, just delivered by different masters. Ultimately, the fall of Ethelberg, its 5 centuries of unimaginable suffering, its descent into a feral hell, and its eventual total annihilation meant nothing. It is a story told to no one. To the wider Imperium, it was not a moral failing. It was not a tragic loss, it was a statistical event. A planet 1 in a million was lost due to a navigation hazard. Its data entry was flagged red. 5 centuries later, the hazard cleared and the file was reviewed. The asset was found to be corrupted. The asset was cleansed. The file was updated. A new asset was seeded. The great grinding indifferent machine of the administratum simply corrected a rounding error. The millions who died, the line of Varus, the choir of Malachias, the fanatical Soria, the demon worshippers, the savage tribes. Their entire history is a footnote on a data slate, an anomaly that has been fixed. The galaxy did not notice its passing. The Imperium will not remember its name. It is just one more ghost in a galaxy of screams. This then is the final lesson. The Imperium of man is a lie. It is not an empire of steel, but an empire of faith held together by the most fragile connections imaginable. The Astronomicon is the Emperor's dying breath, a flicker in an ocean of monsters. The astropaths are the screaming broken souls who carry the word. The tithe ships are the single corpuscles that keep the body from starving. Ethelberg is what happens when those connections are cut. It is the proof that civilization, order, and sanity are not the default state. They are a thin, brittle wall erected against an ocean of absolute primordial chaos. And that wall across a million worlds on every single day is cracking.